My great friend. The millionaire was crying over his dog's death, but a homeless girl said something that the penthouse high in the Primrose Hill neighborhood had never seemed as empty as it did on those July afternoons. Roger Alastair walked barefoot across the chilly, tiled floor, his eyes lost in the panoramic view of London that stretched beyond the glass windows. Down below, the city buzzed with its chaotic traffic, its impatient horns, and its thousands of hurried lives. But inside, in the oppressive silence of that spacious and luxurious area, time seemed to have stopped. He approached the living room window, rested his forehead against the glass, and closed his eyes. For an instant, he allowed himself to imagine he would hear that sound he loved so much again. The scratching of claws on the polished floor, the joyful jingle of his collar, the soft bark of excitement that preceded every reunion. But when he opened his eyes, he only found his own reflection, thinner, more tired, aged by a sadness that no mirror could conceal. Buster. Just thinking about the name of his 6-year-old golden retriever made his chest tighten. 6 months had passed since that terrible night on the Richmond Road, and yet Roger woke up every morning with the irrational hope of seeing the dog lying at the foot of his bed as he always did. The morning routine had transformed into a ritual of renewed pain. Opening his eyes, instinctively searching for the animal's presence, and feeling the weight of absence fall upon him like a stone. The accident had been devastating. His private driver, Sebastian, was returning from a last-minute trip to a construction site in Canterbury when the car skidded on a poorly signposted curve. The embankment was deep, covered in dense undergrowth and loose rocks. Firefighters took hours to rescue Sebastian, who survived with severe fractures, but was alive. From the car, they managed to retrieve debris, luggage, documents, but of Buster, nothing but traces. Golden fur caught in the back seat, his torn collar found yards ahead, bloodstains indicating injuries but not certain death. If he survived, he must have fled into the woods in a panic, the paramedic said with that professional tone that tries to soften others' suffering. Dogs in a panic can run for miles without stopping, but we'll keep our eyes open, Mr. Alastair. If he appears at any shelter or clinic in the region, you will be notified immediately. Roger believed that for weeks, he placed advertisements in newspapers, on the radio, and on social media. He offered generous rewards. He hired people to search farms, country estates, and rural properties within a 30-mile radius. He personally visited dozens of animal shelters, veterinary clinics, and pet shops. He showed photos of Buster to every employee, every volunteer, every person he met. He meticulously described the blue collar with the bone-shaped tag, the scar on his snout that the dog had gotten as a puppy, the characteristic way he would tilt his head when he heard his name. But each day that passed without news was like a small death. Hope, which at first burned strong and stubborn, began to dissolve into silent despair. Calls to shelters became less frequent. Advertisements were no longer renewed. And when his sister, Felicity, delicately suggested that perhaps it was time to accept the possibility that Buster would not return, something inside Roger simply collapsed. His corporate life, which once defined him, lost all meaning. Roger Alastair was known in London as one of the most influential businessmen in the construction industry. His name was etched on construction site signs throughout the metropolitan area. High-end residential complexes, bold, commercial buildings, urban development projects that transformed entire neighborhoods. He had built a solid empire based on strategic vision, operational efficiency, and an impressive ability to anticipate real estate market trends. But now, all of that seemed absurdly irrelevant. Board meetings were cancelled without convincing justifications. Projects that once excited him lay forgotten on his desk, covered in dust. Important contracts missed deadlines because Roger simply couldn't bring himself to care. His partner and right-hand man, Frederick Caldwell, took over practically all daily operations, but even so, the company began to feel the effects of its founder's absence. "Roger, you need to snap out of it," Felicity insisted whenever she visited him. She arrived with homemade meals that he barely touched, with architecture magazines he didn't even open, with invitations to dinners that he refused with tired monosyllables. "The company is suffering, people are worried. You can't give up everything because of a— Don't say it, Roger interrupted her, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Please, don't say he was just a dog. Felicity sighed, her eyes welling up. She knew her brother well enough to know that Buster had never been just a pet. After his difficult divorce from Patricia, after his adult children went on to live their own lives in other cities, Buster had become Roger's constant companion. It was with the dog that he shared Sunday mornings, walks around Hyde Park Lake, and nights when work ended too late to socialize. Buster was always there, faithful, patient, unconditional. I'm sorry, Felicity murmured, touching her brother's arm. I know how much he meant to you, but I'm afraid of losing you too, Roger. You're isolating yourself from everyone. You don't answer calls, you don't leave the house, you barely eat. This can't continue. But Roger didn't know how to stop. The pain of loss swallowed him whole day after day, and he found no strength to fight it. He simply let himself sink, as if punishing himself for failing to protect Buster. If he had gone to retrieve those documents personally, instead of sending Sebastian. If he had insisted on leaving the dog at home that day, instead of allowing him to accompany the driver as he loved to do. If he had paid attention to the road conditions, the late hour, the risks involved. The if-onlys were endless, and each one cut deeper. It was on a cloudy August afternoon that something changed. Not a grand transformation, but a small crack in the wall of apathy that Roger had built around himself. He woke up that morning with a strange restlessness, a feeling that he needed to get out of that apartment or he would suffocate. He didn't plan anything, didn't tell anyone. He simply put on a pair of jeans, a simple shirt, and old trainers he hadn't worn in years. He grabbed his wallet, his keys, and left. He walked aimlessly through the streets of London, rediscovering a city he seemed to have forgotten. The streets of Primrose Hill gave way to the bustling avenues of Soho, which in turn led him to the Old Town. Roger walked slowly, observing hurried faces, street vendors, old buildings contrasting with modern constructions. Everything seemed both familiar and strange, as if he were seeing that city for the first time, or as if he were a version of himself from many years ago, when he was still young and walked these same streets, dreaming of the future he had ended up building. Without quite realizing how, he arrived at Trafalgar Square. The large, open space was filled with people, tourists taking photos, skateboarders practicing tricks, families with children running among the palm trees. Roger sat on a stone bench, away from the main movement, and simply observed. There was something comforting in all that normality, in those lives that moved forward without carrying the weight he carried. The sky was beginning to turn orange when he noticed her presence. A girl of about 10, with curly, unruly hair, faded but clean clothes, worn sandals. She held an umbrella that had seen better days, patched up and with bent spokes. She didn't approach, asking for alms or selling sweets like so many other children Roger was used to seeing on the streets of the capital. She simply walked up to him and stopped, observing him with an intensity that was unsettling in someone so young. Roger, out of habit, reached for the pocket of the jacket he wasn't wearing. He was going to offer some cash, that automatic gesture people like him make to ease their conscience in the face of others' poverty. But before he could say anything, the girl spoke. "Don't worry, okay, I'll be right back, I love you." Roger froze. Those words, exactly those words, in that order, with that intonation. It was what he said to Buster every time he left the house, every time, without exception. A silly, intimate phrase that he had never shared with anyone. It wasn't in interviews. It hadn't been published on social media. It wasn't something his employees or family members knew. It was a secret between him and his dog. "What did you say?" Roger asked, his voice hoarse. The girl tilted her head, her dark eyes fixed on him with a disturbing serenity. "I dream about him. About Buster." The world around seemed to slow down. The sounds of the square became muffled, distant. Roger felt his heart pound in his chest. "How do you know that name?" he whispered, leaning forward. "How do you know what I used to say to him?" "I said." "I dream," the girl repeated, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I started dreaming about him about 2 months ago. At first it was just him running, scared. Then it became clearer. Now I see where he is. Roger wanted to believe it was an elaborate scam, someone trying to take advantage of his vulnerability, perhaps knowing of his desperate search for Buster. But who, and how would they have discovered that specific phrase? He studied the girl's face, looking for signs of lying, of manipulation. He found nothing but disconcerting sincerity. "Where?" he asked, hating the tremor of hope that infiltrated his voice. "Where is he?" "In an old house, painted yellow," the girl replied, closing her eyes as if visualizing the scene. "It has big windows and an orange grove around it, and there are men in black who keep watch over everything. There's a barn, too, a bit further off. At night, sometimes metallic sounds come from there." Roger felt a shiver run down his spine. That description was too specific, too detailed to be invented, and worse, it corresponded with frightening accuracy to a place he knew very well. Blue Ridge Farm in Surrey. The property had been his, part of a rural tourism project that never got off the ground. After years of bitter legal disputes with his former partner, Darius Blackwood, Roger had been forced to sell his share. Darius had assumed full control of the farm and registered it under an obscure company, cutting off all communication about what he intended to do with the place. Roger hadn't set foot there in over 2 years, and as far as he knew, the property was abandoned or being used for purposes Darius kept in absolute secrecy. "Who are you?" Roger asked, his voice filled with urgency. "What's your name?" "Luna," the girl replied simply. "Luna, listen. You need to tell me everything you know, everything you've seen in these dreams, please." The girl looked around as if checking if anyone was watching. Then, with the naturalness of someone inviting a friend for juice, she sat beside him on the bench. "In the dreams I see through the window, like I'm inside his head, you know. I see what he sees," Luna began, her voice low but firm. "He keeps looking out, waiting. He's sad, very sad, but he's not hurt. No, just tired, and thin, thinner than before." "Before?" Roger repeated. "Did you see him before the accident?" "In the dreams I see his memories too. You throwing a yellow ball in the park, you feeding him on the balcony, with the city down below. You sitting on the sofa and him with his head on your lap," Luna described with a precision that made Roger's eyes burn. "He loves you very much. That's why he's sad, because he thinks you won't come for him." A tear rolled down Roger's face before he could contain it. It had been months since he had cried, since he had kept everything locked inside his chest with pure willpower. But hearing those words, coming from that strange child who had no reason to lie about something so specific, broke something inside him. "I looked," he said, his voice cracking. "I looked so hard. Everywhere. No one had seen him. No one knew anything. It's because he's hidden. The men don't let anyone see. They're using him for something, but I don't really know what. There are other dogs there too. I hear barks in the dreams, coming from far away," Luna explained. "But Buster is special. They gave him a separate place, in the little house near the Red Barn." Red Barn. Blue Ridge Farm had exactly that. An old barn painted faded red that Roger had planned to renovate to be part of the tourist project. This couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't. "Luna, I need your help," Roger said, gently taking the girl's small hand. "I need to know more. I need to be sure. Can you dream again? See more details?" The girl pondered for a moment, biting her lower lip. "The dreams come when they come. I don't choose. But I can try to pay more attention, remember everything I see. Can you give me a paper and a pen, so I can write it down when I wake up?" Roger almost laughed at the simplicity of the request. Here he was, a millionaire businessman accustomed to negotiating multi-million-pound contracts, and a street girl was asking him only for paper and a pen. "You'll have notebooks, pens, colored pencils, whatever you need," he promised. "But tell me one thing. Where do you live? Who are you with?" Luna's face closed a little, that initial openness giving way to understandable caution. "I live around. There are some places I stay. You don't have to worry about me, Uncle. I manage just fine." "Luna, if you're going to help me find Buster, then I'll help you too." "That's fair, isn't it?" Roger proposed. choosing his words carefully. He knew stories of children living on the streets of London. He knew the distrust they developed towards adults offering help. It doesn't have to be anything permanent, but I can give you a place to sleep, food, a hot bath, and we'll work together to bring Buster back. What do you think? Luna studied his face for long seconds, those dark eyes seeming to see far beyond the surface. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay. But if it's a lie, I'll disappear. And you'll never find me, okay? I don't lie, Roger replied, and for the first time in months he felt a spark of purpose ignite within his chest. We're bringing him home, Luna, I promise. As they walked together through Trafalgar Square towards the car park where Roger had left his car earlier, neither of them noticed the man in dark glasses observing them from afar, speaking softly on his mobile phone. And they certainly didn't imagine that this casual encounter on an August afternoon would be just the first move in a sequence of events that would change the lives of everyone involved in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The city of London continued its frantic pace as night fell, indifferent to the destinies that were beginning to intertwine in the shadows of its streets. And somewhere in Surrey, on a yellow-painted farm surrounded by orange trees, a golden retriever lifted his head at the distant sound of thunder, as if sensing that something was about to change. The penthouse in Primrose Hill came alive again that night. For the first time in months, the lights were on in all the rooms, the television playing some random channel, sounds of movement echoing through the corridors. Luna walked barefoot across the tiled floor, her eyes wide at so much space, so much luxury, so much she had never imagined existed in a single place. You live here alone? She asked, stopping before the panoramic window that revealed London, illuminated like a carpet of fallen stars. I do, Roger replied, observing the girl with a mixture of tenderness and caution. He still couldn't fully process what he was doing, bringing an unknown child into his home based only on dreams about his missing dog. But there was something about Luna, a disconcerting authenticity that made him trust her against all logic. It was different once. I used to live here with my wife and children, but that was a long time ago. And Buster? Did he live here too? Yes, he used to sleep there. Roger pointed to a corner of the living room where the dog's padded bed still lay, untouched since the accident. Or in my bed, when he managed to convince me with that pleading look he had. Luna smiled for the first time since they met. It was a small but genuine smile that lit up her tired face. I'll prepare the guest room for you, Roger said, heading down the corridor. It has a private bathroom, you can take a hot shower, and I'll lay out clean clothes. Tomorrow we'll buy whatever else you need. Uncle Roger, Luna called him, and there was an unexpected seriousness in her childlike voice. I'm not lying about the dreams. I swear, I really see Buster. I know, Luna. I believe you, he replied, and realized with surprise that it was true. While Luna was showering, Roger sat in his office and opened the laptop he hadn't touched in weeks. He needed information about Blue Ridge Farm. He typed the address into online maps and studied the property from above. The main house was exactly as Luna had described, yellow with large windows, surrounded by an orchard that indeed had orange trees. The red barn appeared on the right side of the property, a little further away. Everything matched. But there was something else. As he zoomed in on the satellite image, Roger noticed details that disturbed him. Security cameras at strategic points, a reinforced fence around the entire perimeter, and what appeared to be a van parked near the barn. For a supposedly abandoned property, there was too much activity. He picked up his mobile phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Hello? A deep voice answered on the other end. Nolan, it's me, Roger Alistair. There was a pause. Roger? Blimey, how long has it been? About 5 years? Roughly. Listen, I need a favor. An unusual favor. Captain Nolan, retired from the Metropolitan Police, now ran a private security firm specializing in discreet investigations. He and Roger had met years ago when the construction company needed protection for an executive who had been receiving threats. The professional relationship had evolved into a respectful friendship based on mutual trust. I'm listening, Nolan replied, his interest evident in his tone. Roger told him everything. The accident, Buster's disappearance, the fruitless search, the meeting with Luna, the impossible dreams, the precise description of Blue Ridge Farm. He spoke non-stop for almost 20 minutes, and Nolan listened in silence, only asking a few pointed questions. "That's quite a story," the former captain commented when Roger finished. "And you really believe this girl? Her dreams?" "I know how it sounds, Nolan. Believe me, I know. But she described things she couldn't possibly have known. Intimate details about Buster, about me. And the description of the farm is too perfect to be a coincidence." "And this farm belongs to your former partner? That Darius Blackwood?" "It does, and he has reasons to hate me," Roger admitted, his voice heavy. "The dissolution of the partnership was messy. Accusations from both sides, lawsuits that dragged on for years. In the end, he got the farm but lost other important assets. I always thought he held a grudge." "A grudge strong enough to kidnap your dog?" Nolan questioned, skeptical. "I have no idea. It sounds crazy, I know. But what if the accident wasn't an accident? What if someone caused that skid? Sebastian, my driver, said a car cut them off moments before the crash, but he was too confused to give details. At the time, we thought it was just a reckless driver." Nolan was silent for a moment, processing the information. "I'll investigate, discreetly. I'll send one of my men to do surveillance on the property, see what kind of activity is going on there. If your dog really is there, we'll find out." "Thank you, Nolan. Seriously, this means a lot to me. Just don't get your hopes up too much, Roger. 6 months is a long time, and even if the girl is being sincere about the dreams, it might just be her imagination filling in gaps with information she picked up somehow." But Roger already had hope. For the first time since that terrible night on the road, he felt that perhaps he hadn't lost Buster forever. When he returned to the living room, he found Luna wrapped in a giant bathrobe, her wet hair falling over her shoulders, sitting on the sofa, flipping through an architecture magazine. "Did you find everything you needed?" he asked. "Yes, the shower is really cool. It even has those jets on the sides," she said, with childlike enthusiasm. "And the room is the size of the entire house I used to live in." Used to. Roger realized he knew very little about Luna, where she came from, how she ended up on the streets, if she had family. "Luna, do you mind telling me a little about yourself? Only if you want to, no pressure." The girl closed the magazine and pulled her knees to her chest, becoming small inside the huge bathrobe. For a moment, Roger thought she would refuse, but then she began to speak, her voice low but firm. I used live in Coventry with my mum and my little brother. My dad left when I was a baby. I never knew him. My mum worked in a clothes factory, doing double shifts to pay the bills. It was hard, but we managed." "What happened?" Roger asked gently. "She got sick. It was fast. In 2 months she couldn't work anymore, and soon after, she passed away," Luna said, using the euphemism naturally. "My brother went to live with an aunt in Reading, but the aunt said she couldn't afford to take care of both of us, so I went to a shelter." "And you ran away?" "Not exactly. The shelter was crowded, had a lot of rules, a lot of kids. I didn't adapt well. I started spending more time on the street, met other boys and girls who lived out there. It became easier to stay out than to go back. Then one day I just didn't go back." "How long ago was that?" "About 8 months, more or less." Roger felt his chest tighten. 8 months. The same age as Luna's life on the streets almost perfectly coincided with the time Buster had been missing. Could it be a coincidence? And the dreams, when did they start? "I've always had strange dreams," Luna admitted, looking at her own hands. "Since I was little. My mum said I had a gift, that I inherited it from my grandmother. She saw things too. Things that hadn't happened yet or that were happening far away. But the dreams with Buster started about 2 months ago, like I said. At first it was confusing, just blurry images, sensations. Then it became clearer." "Why do you think you dream specifically about him?" Luna shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because he needed to be found. Maybe because you needed to find him. Sometimes dreams show me things that matter, things that can change something." There was an ancient wisdom in that child that completely contradicted her apparent age. Roger wondered how many lives Luna had already lived on the streets of London, how many difficulties she had faced, how many times she had had to grow up faster than she should have. "Are you hungry? I can order some food," he offered. Luna's eyes lit up. "Do you have pizza?" Roger smiled. "We have pizza." While they waited for the delivery, Luna told him more about the dreams. She described Buster's routine on the farm. He woke up in a wooden kennel, was fed by a man whose face she couldn't see, spent the day confined in a makeshift pen, and returned to the kennel at night. There were other dogs, but kept separate. From where Buster was, she could hear distant barks, especially at night. "He spends a lot of time looking out the window," Luna repeated. "Waiting, always waiting." "And are you sure it's Blue Ridge Farm? Couldn't it be another similar place?" "I saw the name," Luna said, suddenly surprising Roger. "In one of the most recent dreams. There's an old, slightly fallen sign at the entrance to the property. It said Blue Ridge, and underneath there was something about rural tourism, but it was faded." Roger was speechless. The sign really existed. He himself had commissioned it years ago, when he still believed the project would succeed. It was a carved wooden sign with the farm's name in large letters, and underneath, the description, "Rural Tourism Retreat." With time and lack of maintenance, the smaller letters must have faded, but the main name would still be visible. "Luna, that's impossible. How could you know that?" "I don't know how I know," she replied, frustrated. "I just know that I know. It's like I'm there, but not with my body. Like my mind can travel. My mum said that happened to her too, before I was born. That she saw things happening in other places with other people." The pizza arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence. Roger watched Luna devour the slices with the voracious appetite of someone who didn't know when her next decent meal would be, and made a silent decision. Regardless of what happened to Buster, regardless of what they discovered about the farm, Luna would not go back to the streets. He would take care of her, help her rebuild her life, perhaps even reconnect her with her brother if possible. It was the least he could do. After dinner, Luna began to yawn. Roger accompanied her to the guest room, which he had prepared with clean sheets, fluffy blankets, and even some children's books he found on a forgotten shelf. "Try to sleep and pay attention to the dreams, okay?" he asked. "Any detail can be important, and if you dream about Buster, so again, wake me up, no matter what time it is." "Okay, Uncle Roger," Luna murmured, already sinking into the soft mattress. "Good night." "Good night, little one." Roger returned to his office and spent the night awake, researching everything he could about Darius Blackwood. He discovered that his former partner had been involved in several businesses after the separation from the construction company, not all of them entirely legal. There were rumors of inflated contracts, ghost projects, links to corrupt politicians. Nothing proven, but enough to tarnish his reputation. Blue Ridge Farm, registered under a company called Pioneer Asset Security. Traced appeared in few public documents, always related to vague training and conditioning activities. Conditioning. Roger felt a chill. What if they were using the farm to train guard dogs? What if Buster, with his natural intelligence and physique, had been deemed valuable for this type of operation? At 3 in the morning, his mobile phone vibrated. It was a message from Nolan. "Sent a man for reconnaissance, confirming movement on the property. Vehicles entering and leaving at night. Tomorrow I'll go personally. We'll send you a report in 24." Roger replied with a thank you and finally allowed himself to lie down, even knowing he wouldn't be able to sleep. But the fatigue of the past few months took its toll, and he fell asleep without realizing it, still dressed, on the bed he hadn't shared with anyone for so long. He was woken by screams, sharp, frightened screams coming from the guest room. He jumped out of bed and ran down the corridor, his heart pounding. He found Luna sitting in bed, sweating, her eyes wide, fixed on something only she could see. "Luna, Luna, it's okay. It was just a dream," he said, sitting beside her and gently touching her shoulder. The girl blinked several times, slowly returning to reality. "It wasn't just a dream," she whispered, her voice trembling. I I saw everything. What did you see? Buster. He was digging under the little house where he sleeps. He was desperate, as if he wanted to hide something, and there was a man shouting at him, telling him to stop. But he didn't stop. He kept digging until he managed to bury it. Bury what? Roger asked, confused. I don't know. It looked like a folder, like those document folders. The man was furious. He hit him, Uncle Roger, Luna began to cry. Hit him a lot. And Buster didn't do anything. He just kept protecting the hole. Roger hugged her, feeling anger rise in his chest. The idea of someone hurting Buster, of his dog suffering while he was here, powerless, was unbearable. It's okay, we're going to get him, I promise, Luna. We're bringing him home. But as he calmed the girl, his mind worked frantically. A document folder, buried under the kennel where Buster slept. Why would a dog do that? Dogs don't hide documents unless he had been trained for it, unless it was part of some specific conditioning. What if Buster had seen something he shouldn't have, heard conversations, witnessed movements? And what if, in his characteristic intelligence, he had picked up something important and hidden it? The story was getting increasingly complicated, and Roger had a growing feeling that Buster's disappearance was no accident. There was purpose there. There was intention. And Darius Blackwood was at the center of it all. He spent the rest of the night with Luna, listening to every detail she could remember from the dream. The color of the kennel, faded blue. The position of the hole, left corner near a tree root. Even the expression on the face of the man who had hit Buster, anger mixed with fear, as if he had discovered something terrible. When the sun rose over London, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Roger and Luna were on the balcony, drinking hot chocolate and planning their next steps. The city woke up below, indifferent to the silent battle that was just beginning. And somewhere in Surrey, a golden retriever raised his snout to the morning breeze, as if sniffing hope coming. From afar, carried by the English wind that blew promises of reunion, the following days unfolded in a feverish mix of hope and tension. Roger returned to a routine, but now completely different from the one he had before. He woke up early with Luna, prepared breakfast for the two of them, and while she studied with books he had bought, he coordinated the investigation with Nolan and tried to maintain appearances of normalcy at the company. Frederick Caldwell, his partner, was relieved to see Roger showing signs of life again, even if he wasn't yet fully present at meetings. "It's good to have you back, even partially," Frederick commented during a quick lunch at the office. "The company was starting to flounder without you." "I'm sorry for everything, Frederick. I know I put a lot on your shoulders," Roger admitted, distractedly stirring the salad he barely touched. "Hey, we've been partners and friends for how long? 15 years. I understand what you've been through, but tell me one thing. What changed? You're different. You're not the Roger of before yet, but there's a new energy." Roger thought about telling him about Luna, about the dreams, about the farm investigation, but something stopped him. The fewer people who knew, the better, at least for now. "I'm trying to move on, finally," was all he said. But the truth was far more complex. That same morning, Nolan had sent the first detailed report, and the content was disturbing. Blue Ridge Farm was definitely in operation. Surveillance cameras covered the entire perimeter. A team of at least 6 men worked in alternating shifts, and there was constant vehicle movement, especially at night. More importantly, Nolan had managed to capture, using a powerful zoom camera, images of several dogs on the property. German. Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dobermans, and yes, a golden retriever. The photo was from a distance, but Roger would recognize Buster in any circumstance. His build, the color of his fur, even the way he walked was unmistakable. His heart almost stopped when he saw the image. Buster was alive, thin as Luna had described, with his fur less shiny than it used to be, but definitely alive. "We need to act," Roger told Nolan on the phone that afternoon. "We need to get him out of there." "Calm down, Roger. We can't just invade. It's private property, there's armed security, and we have no proof of anything illegal happening there. If we go in without authorization, we'll be the ones prosecuted." "And what do you suggest? That I sit here knowing my dog is trapped there?" "I suggest we be smart. I need a few more days to fully map the property, identify weak points in security, understand the guards' shifts, and most importantly, find out what the hell is going on in there. Why would your former partner keep a golden retriever with professional guard dogs? It was a good question. Roger had no answer. It was Luna who brought the next piece of the puzzle. 3 nights later, she had another dream. This time, she woke up calmly and went to the office where Roger was working late, checking old blueprints and farm documents. "Uncle Roger, I need to tell you something," she said from the doorway. He looked up from his papers. Luna was in her pajamas, barefoot, holding a notebook where she wrote down her dreams. "Did you dream about Buster again?" "Yes, but this time it was different. It wasn't just about him, it was about you too, about the past." Roger frowned. "What do you mean?" Luna came in and sat in the chair opposite the desk. She opened the notebook to a page covered with childlike drawings and words written in a shaky hand. "I saw you and another man. You were at the farm, but it was different, new. It even had cut grass and everything. You were discussing blueprints, construction. You seemed like friends." "Darius," Roger murmured. "You saw me and Darius. Was that the other man's name? In the dream you were planning something big. A hotel, I think, with chalets and a leisure area. You were excited." Roger felt a pang in his chest. That had indeed happened years ago. He and Darius, still partners and friends, had visited Blue Ridge Farm for the first time and dreamed together of the rural tourism project. They had spent the whole day walking around the property, imagining where the buildings would be, how they would take advantage of the natural orchard, where they would build the leisure area with swimming pools. Those were better times, before the disagreements, before the betrayals. "But then the image changed," Luna continued, consulting her notes. "You were arguing, fighting badly, papers were scattered, and the other man was red with anger. He shouted something about you having stolen from him, and you shouted back that he was the one embezzling money." "How do you know that?" Roger asked, his voice coming out sharper than he intended. "How are you seeing things from my past?" Luna shrugged, startled by the reaction. "I don't know. I don't control the dreams. They just come." Roger took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. "I'm sorry, Luna. I didn't mean to scare you. It's just those memories are difficult for me. I know I feel it when I dream. I feel the anger, the sadness, the disappointment. Was that why you fought, because of money?" "It was more complicated than that," Roger explained, leaning back in his chair. "Darius and I were more than partners. We were childhood friends. We grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same school, started the construction company together when we were barely 25. We trusted each other completely." "What happened?" "I discovered he was inflating construction costs and pocketing the difference. They were small amounts at first, but they grew. When I confronted him, he denied it. He said I was the one being paranoid, wanting to take his share. The argument escalated, lawsuits were filed, the partnership imploded. In the end, we divided the assets. He kept some properties, including the farm. I kept the construction company's brand and most of the contracts. And he got angry. He did. Very angry. He even made veiled threats, said I would regret it. At the time, I thought they were just words spoken in the heat of the moment. But now you think he took Buster on purpose," Luna finished. "I don't know. I don't want to believe someone would be capable of such malice. But the evidence is all there. The accident on Richmond Road, very close to properties belonging to companies linked to Darius. The fact that Buster simply disappeared without a trace. And now discovering that he is exactly on my former partner's farm. In the dream, I saw one more thing," Luna said hesitantly. "The angry man, Darius, was talking to other men, saying that you would pay for everything, that you would lose what you loved most, just as he had lost." "What did he lose?" "I don't know, it wasn't clear, but there was a lot of pain in him, a lot of bitterness, as if you had taken something very important from him." Roger closed his eyes, trying to remember. What could Darius have lost besides money and the partnership? Then an old memory emerged, hazy but disturbing. Patricia, his ex-wife. Before they married, she and Darius had gone out a few times. Nothing serious, just casual dates. But when Roger and Patricia fell in love, Everything happened quickly. They married in less than a year. Darius was the best man, smiling and seemingly happy for them, but could it have been just an appearance? Had he held a grudge all those years? "This is crazy," Roger murmured to himself. He wouldn't hold a grudge for so long. He wouldn't do all this because of a woman who wasn't even his real girlfriend. But the more he thought, the more the pieces fit. The subtle provocations Darius made during meetings, always mentioning Patricia somewhat inappropriately. The way his behavior changed after Roger's divorce, as if he was secretly pleased. The questionable decisions he began to make in the company, almost sabotaging important projects, as if he wanted to see Roger fail. He hated me, Roger realized aloud. All these years he hated me and I never noticed. "And now he has Buster," Luna added sadly. Roger's mobile phone vibrated. It was a message from Nolan. "Important update. Made contact with someone who worked at the farm. He wants to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., cafe in Soho. Come alone." Roger showed the message to Luna. "We're getting close. I feel it." "Me too," she agreed. "But, Uncle Roger, be careful. In the dreams, I feel there's danger. A lot of danger." "I will be, I promise." But promises are fragile when fate has already decided its path. The next day, Roger arrived at the cafe promptly at 2 p.m. Nolan was already there, accompanied by a thin man, about 40, with nervous eyes and fidgety hands. "Roger, this is Marcus. He worked at the farm until last week. Marcus, you can tell him what you told me." Marcus looked around before starting, as if fearing to be watched. "Look, I don't know if I should be doing this. The boss made it very clear that anyone who talked about the operation would be in trouble." "You don't need to be afraid," Roger said gently. "I just want to know about my dog, about the golden retriever that's there." "Oh yes, Buster, that's what the boss calls him," Marcus confirmed, and Roger's heart raced at hearing the name. "He's treated differently from the other dogs. He's kept separate in his own little house. The boss visits him almost every day." "Visits? To do what?" "Talks to him. I know it sounds crazy, but he stays there, talking as if the dog would understand, says things about you, about how you ruined his life, about how now he has what you love most." Roger felt nauseous. "Does he hurt Buster?" Marcus looked away. "Look, I saw him hit him a few times when the dog tried to run away or didn't obey, but nothing too serious. He wants the animal alive and healthy. He just wants to use him for something." "Use him how?" Nolan intervened. "I'm not sure, but I overheard conversations. The boss is planning something big, some kind of scheme against you, Mr. Alistair, and the dog is part of the plan somehow." "What kind of scheme?" "I don't know the details, I just know it involves documents that prove something, about old construction projects, overbilling schemes. The boss is paranoid about these papers, keeps everything locked up. But once I saw him showing a folder to Buster, laughing, saying that it would destroy your reputation." The folder. The folder Luna had seen Buster bury in her dreams. Everything was starting to make sense in a distorted and disturbing way. "Marcus, can you draw a map of the farm? Show exactly where Buster's kennel is, the security points, everything?" "I can, but you're not thinking of invading, are you? Because there's armed security there, day and night. You won't be able to get in unseen." "Leave that to me," Nolan said, with the professional tone of someone who had planned more dangerous missions. Marcus drew the map on a napkin, detailing each building, each camera, each surveillance point. He explained the security guards' shifts, the times of least movement, the weaknesses of the system. In return, Roger gave him an envelope with enough cash for him to disappear for a few weeks, enough time for everything to be resolved one way or another. When he returned home, he found Luna drawing in the living room. She looked up, read something in his expression, and simply asked, "When are we going to get him?" "Soon," Roger replied. "Very soon." But first, there were preparations to make, plans to draw up, risks to calculate, because it was no longer just about rescuing a dog. It was about dismantling years of accumulated resentment, about confronting a man who had turned love into hatred and used that hatred to build revenge. It was about justice, about truth, about closing a cycle that had begun in friendship and been lost in betrayal. And Roger was ready for it, with Luna by his side, with Nolan coordinating the operation, and with the certainty that Buster was waiting for him somewhere on that farm. He was finally ready to act. The following dawn would be decisive, and London, illuminated below as always, would remain indifferent to the silent battle that would unfold in the shadows of Surrey, where destinies would cross and buried truths would finally come to light. The full moon illuminated the Surrey sky with an almost ghostly clarity. Roger looked at his watch. 2:37 a.m. Inside the dark van parked 200 yards from the entrance to Blue Ridge Farm, 5 people prepared in tense silence. Nolan checked the communication equipment. 2 of his most experienced men, Charlie and Ben, adjusted their vests and reviewed the plan for the 10th time. And Luna, insistent on participating against all of Roger's protests, wore dark clothes that were too big for her, her eyes fixed on a distant point as if she could already see through the property's walls. "Last chance to turn back," Nolan said to Roger, but without much conviction in his voice. He knew that look. He knew the determination of a man who would not take no for an answer. "I won't turn back. We've waited too long," Roger replied, his voice firm despite his trembling hands. "And does the girl really need to go?" All eyes turned to Luna, who raised her chin with a courage that didn't match her thin 10 years of life. "Yes, I do. I know exactly where he is. I saw it in my dreams. You'll waste time looking, and time is what we don't have," she argued for the 5th time that night. Roger sighed. He knew she was right, even though he hated putting her at risk. Luna's dreams had become increasingly detailed in recent days. She had described the blue kennel where Buster slept with millimeter precision. It was at the back of the property near the red barn, partially hidden by orange trees. It had a small window facing east, and the door was locked with a simple bolt. More importantly, she knew exactly where the hole Buster had dug was, where the folder of documents Darius so desperately wanted to hide would be buried. The plan was simple in theory, dangerous in practice. They would enter through the west side of the farm, where Marcus had indicated there was only one camera, with a limited angle. Nolan had managed through contacts Roger preferred not to question, a device that would interfere with the camera signals for approximately 15 minutes, enough time for them to enter and reach the back area. Charlie and Ben would discreetly neutralize the 2 security guards on external patrol, using fast-acting tranquilizers. Luna would guide Roger to Buster's kennel. They would get the dog, recover the documents if possible, and leave before the alarm was triggered. Simple, dangerous, possibly insane. "Everyone knows what to do?" Nolan asked, looking each one in the eye. Affirmative nods, deep breaths. Then, like a ballet choreographed by tension, they exited the van. The night was silent, only the distant chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the wind. They walked crouched along the dirt road until they reached the entry point. The wire fence was high, but Ben had brought an industrial cutter that did the job in seconds. The opening was large enough for everyone to pass through one by one. Inside the property, the world seemed to change. The main farmhouse glowed in the distance with some faint lights. The red barn Luna had described so much stood, like a solid shadow against the starry sky. And somewhere there, hidden among trees and makeshift constructions, Buster waited. Nolan raised the interference device. "Activating now. We have 15 minutes. Maybe less if the system has automatic backup. Move." Charlie and Ben disappeared into the shadows, heading to meet the security guards. Nolan took the lead, guiding Roger and Luna along a path that bypassed the main house. Every step seemed to echo too loudly, every breath to sound like thunder. Roger felt his heart pound against his ribs, the adrenaline sharpening his senses to the extreme. Luna walked with surprising confidence, as if she had indeed traveled that path hundreds of times in her dreams. She pointed to the left when they reached a fork in the trees. "That way, through the orchard." Nolan checked the map Marcus had drawn. It matched perfectly. They followed the girl's direction. The orange grove exuded an intense citrus scent. The branches formed a natural canopy that blocked some of the moonlight, making the walk more treacherous. Roger tripped on a protruding root, but Nolan caught him before he fell. "Slowly," the former captain whispered. "We can't make any noise." Then Luna stopped. Abruptly, her eyes fixed on something ahead. "There, the blue kennel. I'm seeing it just like in the dream." And it really was. Partially hidden by 3 large orange trees, there was a wooden kennel painted faded blue, slightly larger than a common doghouse but built with more care. It had a small window with thin bars, and the door was locked exactly as Luna had described. Roger felt his legs weaken. After so many months, so many searches, so many sleepless nights, he was meters away from Buster. He had to lean against a tree to keep from falling. "Mr. Alistair, are you all right?" Nolan asked softly. "I am. It's a lot of emotion." "Let's check if he's inside. Luna, stay here with him. I'll approach." But before Nolan could take a step, Luna pointed to the window. "Look, he's looking." And he was. Between the thin bars of the window, a golden snout pressed against the glass. Even in the dim light, Roger would recognize those eyes anywhere. Buster. His Buster, alive, real, there. Something inside Roger broke. All the weeks of contained pain, repressed hope, unadmitted fear, exploded at once. He stepped out from behind the tree and walked towards the kennel, ignoring caution or plan. "Mr. Alistair, wait," Nolan hissed, but it was too late. Roger reached the window and pressed his hand against the glass. On the other side, Buster rose on his hind legs, resting his front paws on the window. They looked at each other for seconds that seemed eternal. The dog's tail began to wag, slowly at first, then frantically. A low, controlled whine escaped the animal's throat. "Hey, boy, it's me. I came for you. I finally came for you," Roger whispered, tears now streaming freely. Luna approached with Nolan right behind. "We have to open the door, quick, before someone hears." The bolt was simple, but it was rusty. Nolan had to force it a little, and when it finally gave way, the metallic sound seemed to echo throughout the farm. Everyone froze, expecting shouts of alarm, running footsteps, lights turning on. But nothing happened, only the silence of the English Midlands dawn, indifferent to human dramas. The door creaked open, and there was Buster, too thin, his fur matted and dull, a new scar above his left eye that hadn't been there before, but alive. Completely. Undoubtedly. Alive. Roger entered the kennel and knelt. Buster launched himself at him with surprising force for such a weakened animal, licking his face, crying those sharp sounds dogs make when they reunite with their owners after a long time. Roger hugged him tightly, feeling his prominent ribs through his fur but not caring. He buried his face in the dog's neck and let himself cry as he hadn't since childhood. "I'm so sorry. So sorry. I should never have let you go in that car. I should never have taken so long to find you, but I'm here now. I'm here and I'm taking you home," he murmured between sobs. Luna watched the scene with her own tear-filled eyes. Nolan, a tough man trained not to show emotions, had to turn his face and pretend to check something on his communicator. "Mr. Alistair," he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "We need to go. 8 minutes have already passed." "Wait," Luna intervened. "The folder. We need to get the folder." Roger reluctantly let go of Buster and looked around the kennel. It was Spartan, an old blanket in a corner, a water bowl, a food bowl. And in the left corner, exactly where Luna had described, there were clear signs of recent digging. The earth was disturbed, and part of it had been put back, as if someone had tried to cover it up. "There," Luna pointed. "Dig there." Roger used his bare hands to remove the earth. He didn't have to dig much. Less than 8 inches deep, his fingers touched plastic. He pulled carefully, and a sealed plastic folder emerged, still intact despite the dampness. With trembling hands, he broke the seal. Inside were dozens of documents, construction blueprints with handwritten annotations, contracts with altered values, fake receipts, spreadsheets detailing systematic overbilling. And what was most incriminating, everything pointed not only to Darius, but to an extensive network of corruption involving local council members, city construction inspectors, and even judges who had favored decisions in lawsuits related to the construction company. "My God," Nolan whispered, quickly flipping through the papers. "This is pure dynamite. With this evidence, half of London's political elite will fall." That's why he was so paranoid about hiding them, Roger realized. He wasn't just holding evidence against me. He was holding evidence that would incriminate him along with several other powerful people. "How did Buster get it?" Luna asked. It was a good question. Roger looked at the dog, who was now sitting beside him, his thin body trembling slightly. Buster was always intelligent and curious. He probably saw Darius with the folder, maybe even followed him when he came to hide it here. Dogs have an incredible instinct for reading human emotions. He must have sensed that it was important, something that caused fear in Darius. And he did what dogs do, picked it up and hid it as if it were a valuable toy, and ended up saving you. Without even knowing it, Luna finished, smiling for the first time that tense night. Nolan's communicator crackled. It was Charlie. "Captain, we have movement. A pickup truck just entered through the main gate. 2 occupants. They seem armed." "Received. How long until they reach the main house?" 3 minutes, maybe less. Nolan looked at Roger. "We need to go. Now." There was no need to repeat. Roger picked up Buster despite his weight, and the group began to run back through the orchard. The dog, weak as he was, didn't struggle. He simply snuggled against Roger's chest, as he did when he was a puppy. Luna ran ahead, guiding them with the confidence of someone who knew every tree, every turn in the path. Nolan covered the rear, constantly checking if they were being followed. They were almost reaching the fence when the night exploded with sound. Alarms blaring, lights turning on all over the property, voices shouting orders in a strong regional accent. "Run!" Nolan ordered. They scrambled through the opening in the fence chaotically. Ben was waiting on the other side, helping each one through. Charlie appeared running a few seconds later. "They saw us. They're coming," he gasped. The van was where they left it, engine already running. Everyone piled inside haphazardly. Nolan took the wheel and floored the accelerator before all the doors were completely closed. The dirt road turned into a cloud of dust behind them. In the rearview mirrors, Roger saw headlights turning on at the property, the pickup truck beginning the chase. But Nolan knew those back roads better than anyone. He made 3 quick turns, taking shortcuts that the larger pickup truck couldn't follow, until they finally reached the main motorway. Only when they were back on the M1, blended into the sparse, early morning traffic, did everyone allow themselves to breathe. "We did it," Luna said, her smile illuminating her tired face. "We really did it." Roger continued to hold Buster, unable to let him go even for a second. The dog had fallen asleep, exhausted, but with a peaceful expression he hadn't had since before the accident. "We did it," he repeated, still not fully believing it. After so many months of pain, searching, despair, he finally had Buster back. Not only that, he had in his hands evidence that could dismantle the entire network of corruption Darius had built. Nolan looked in the rearview mirror, meeting Roger's eyes. "And now? What are we going to do with these documents?" It was a question that deserved reflection. Those papers could destroy careers, end fortunes, send powerful people to prison, but they would also bring consequences. Darius wouldn't stay quiet. The people involved in the scheme would fight with all their might to protect their secrets. "Now," Roger said slowly, "we're going home. We're going to take care of Buster, make sure he's well, and tomorrow when the sun rises we'll decide what the right thing to do is." Luna snuggled against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "The right thing is always to tell the truth, Uncle Roger." And she was right, of course. She was right about so many things. That mysterious girl of impossible dreams who had appeared in his life when he needed her most. As the van sped down the motorway back to London, carrying within it a businessman reconciled with hope, a girl who finally had a home, a dog finally free, and documents that would change everything, the full moon watched from above, indifferent to human destinies, but a silent witness that sometimes stories really can have endings that feel like new beginnings. 3 weeks had passed since that dawn at Blue Ridge Farm. 3 weeks that transformed not only Roger's life, but the lives of everyone involved in that improbable story of dreams, rescue, and redemption. The penthouse in Primrose Hill was unrecognizable. Where before the oppressive silence of solitude reigned, now sounds of life echoed. Buster running across the tiled floor after his favorite yellow ball, Luna laughing as she watched the dog clown around, music playing softly, the aroma of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen. Roger stood on the balcony, watching London awaken under the orange morning sun, and for the first time in a long time he felt something he had forgotten, genuine happiness. Buster was recovering well. The vet Roger had hired to examine him extensively declared that, despite malnutrition and clear signs of stress, there was no permanent damage. With proper nutrition, affection and patience, the golden retriever would return to being the healthy dog he always was. The scar above his eye would be permanent, but Roger saw it as a badge of honor, proof of the resilience of the animal he loved so much. Luna was also different. She had gained weight. Her curly hair now shone clean and well cared for, and the clothes she wore were new, chosen by herself at a shopping center they visited together. More important than the external transformation was the internal one. The girl who lived on the streets with a guarded and defensive look now smiled openly, spoke about her dreams naturally, and for the first time in a long time allowed herself to simply be a child. Roger had formalized the temporary guardianship process with the intention of making it permanent. He had spoken with social workers, presented documentation, and proved he could offer a stable home. And more importantly, he had reconnected with Luna's younger brother, Michael, who lived in Reading with his aunt. The meetings between the siblings happened weekly, always emotional, always full of promises of a future where they would be closer. "Uncle Roger," Luna called him from the living room, "the lawyer is coming." Roger took a deep breath. This would be the decisive day, the day he would finally decide what to do with the documents they had recovered from the farm. Dr. Martha Forrester arrived promptly at 9 o'clock. She was a woman in her 50s, grey hair tied in a severe bun, discreet framed glasses, and an impeccable reputation as one of the best criminal defense lawyers in the English Midlands. Roger had hired her specifically because he knew he would need someone absolutely incorruptible to deal with what he was about to unleash. "Mr. Alistair," she greeted formally, entering the room with an executive folder in her hands, "I have completed the full analysis of the documents you provided, and I must say, in 27 years of career I have rarely seen such an explosive set of evidence." "You can speak openly, Luna can hear," Roger said, seeing the lawyer hesitate upon noticing the girl's presence. Dr. Martha nodded and opened the folder on the coffee table. "Very well. The documents unequivocally prove a corruption scheme involving 17 public works carried out over the past 8 years. Systematic overbilling, use of substandard materials, payment of bribes to inspectors and politicians. The diverted funds total approximately £43 million. Roger felt the weight of that number. 43 million that should have gone to schools, hospitals, infrastructure. 43 million that enriched greedy men at the expense of the population. "Have you identified everyone involved?" "Yes. In addition to Darius Blackwood, we have 3 council members, 2 city council construction inspectors, a judge who facilitated processes, and at least 5 businessmen who actively participated in the scheme. I also found evidence that completely exonerates you, Mr. Alistair," she added, looking him in the eye. "Several documents prove that you opposed these practices when you were still a partner with Mr. Blackwood. There are emails, meeting minutes, even recordings where you question irregular procedures." "So Darius removed me precisely because I was an obstacle," Roger murmured, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Precisely. And when the partnership was dissolved, he assumed full control of the illicit operations. According to the dates on the documents, the scheme intensified exactly after your departure." Luna, sitting on the sofa with Buster lying beside her, asked, "And now what's going to happen?" Dr. Martha closed the folder. "That depends on Mr. Alistair. I can present these documents to the Crown Prosecution Service today. An operation would likely be launched within a week. Search and seizure warrants, preventive arrests, asset freezes. It would be the end of the line for everyone involved." "But," Roger caught the hesitation in her voice, "but there will be consequences. You will be called to testify extensively. Your company will be investigated, even if the evidence exonerates you. The process will be long, exhausting, and will attract intense media attention. Your private life will be exposed. And desperate, powerful men are dangerous men, Mr. Alistair. You will need protection, at least initially. Roger walked to the window, his hands in his pockets, his gaze lost in the city below. That city he had helped build, literally. How many of the buildings he saw there bore his signature? How many families lived in buildings his company had erected? And how many of those projects had been tainted by the corruption he had never known existed? Uncle Roger, Luna approached, touching his arm. Remember what you told me that first night? That you didn't lie? He looked at the girl, seeing in those dark eyes a wisdom that transcended age. I remember. Then you can't lie now. You can't pretend you don't know about these bad things. You have to do the right thing, even if it's hard. Suddenly tears welled up in Roger's eyes. How did that child always manage to hit exactly the right spot? How could someone so young be so wise? You're right, Luna, as always, he said, his voice choked. Then he turned to the lawyer. Dr. Martha, prepare everything. I want these documents to reach the Crown Prosecution Service today, and I want to cooperate fully with the investigations. I have my own documentation from the time of the partnership that can help contextualize everything. The lawyer smiled, and for the first time since she arrived, she seemed genuinely pleased. I knew you'd say that. I have everything prepared. I can file it this morning. After Dr. Martha left, Roger sat on the floor next to Buster and Luna. The dog immediately put his head on his lap, those brown eyes fixed on him with unconditional adoration. Luna snuggled on the other side, her head on his shoulder. Everything's going to be okay, isn't it? She asked softly. It is, Roger promised, wrapping an arm around her. It might be difficult for a while. There will be investigations. There will be trials. There will probably be people trying to intimidate us. But in the end, the truth always wins, and we're on the right side. And we're together, Luna added. Yes, we are together. Buster barked as if agreeing, and everyone laughed. The following days were exactly as Dr. Martha had predicted. Chaotic. The operation launched by the Crown Prosecution Service was given a grand name, Operation Shaky Ground, and dominated the headlines of all newspapers in the English Midlands. Darius Blackwood was arrested in flagrante, trying to flee to France, along with 2 of the council members involved. Searches and seizures occurred simultaneously at 17 addresses. Documents were confiscated, computers seized, bank accounts frozen. Roger was called to testify 3 times in the first week. Each session lasted hours, but he answered everything with absolute transparency, providing not only the information the prosecutors requested, but everything he knew about the old company's operations. His cooperation was so complete that he quickly moved from being an investigated party to a key witness for the prosecution. The media, naturally, had a field day. Reporters camped at the entrance to the Primrose Hill building. Helicopters flew overhead trying to capture images. Roger gave only one press conference, explaining his version of events clearly and directly, and then refused to make further public statements, leaving his lawyer to deal with the press. Frederick Caldwell, his current partner, handled the crisis at the construction company with admirable competence. He issued statements reassuring clients and investors, emphasizing that the current company had no connection to the illicit practices of the past, and even hired an independent audit to review all contracts from the last 5 years. The transparency worked. After the initial shock, business stabilized. But amidst all this public chaos, equally important private changes were happening. Felicity, Roger's sister, visited the penthouse for the first time since Luna had arrived. The reunion between the two was emotional. Felicity cried upon hearing the girl's story and immediately offered to help with anything necessary. She became a constant presence in the apartment, bringing homemade food, helping Luna with her studies, and slowly filling a void that had existed since the girl's mother passed away. "You're being a blessing in her life," Felicity told Roger one night, as they watched Luna play with Buster in the living room. "But did you know she's also being a blessing in yours?" "I know," Roger admitted. "When I found her that day in the square, I thought I was saving a child. But in truth, she saved me." "You saved each other," Felicity corrected, smiling. Michael, Luna's brother, began spending entire weekends at the penthouse. He was a shy 8-year-old boy, but he opened up completely when he was with his sister. Roger was already talking to the children's aunt about the possibility of taking guardianship of both. The house was large enough, his heart certainly was, and seeing the siblings together again seemed like the most natural thing in the world. Nolan and his team received a generous bonus for their work in the rescue operation. More than that, Roger hired them as personal security during the most intense period of the investigations. Their presence brought necessary peace of mind, especially in the first few weeks when veiled threats arrived through various channels. And Buster, the involuntary catalyst for it all, returned completely to his cheerful and playful personality. He had gained weight, his fur had regained its characteristic golden sheen, and the only visible difference was that scar above his eye that Roger had learned to see as a symbol of overcoming adversity. 2 months after the launch of Operation Shaky Ground, the results began to appear. Darius Blackwood, facing irrefutable evidence, entered a plea bargain, confessing everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. The council members were removed from their positions. The corrupt judge lost his robes and would face both criminal prosecution and proceedings before the Judicial Ethics Committee. The businessmen involved had their assets frozen and agreed to return the diverted funds to public coffers. But the most impactful revelation came during Darius's testimony. Confronted about Buster's kidnapping, he finally confessed the whole story. The accident on Richmond Road was no accident. It had been meticulously planned. Darius had hired someone to cut off Sebastian's car on the curve, causing the skid. The objective was twofold: to cause suffering to Roger and simultaneously to gain access to the dog. Why? Pure and simple revenge. "He had everything I ever wanted," Darius declared in testimony that was made public. "The company, the success, the respect. And he had Patricia, the woman I loved even before he appeared. When she chose Roger, I swallowed the humiliation and pretended everything was fine. But it never was. The resentment grew for years. When I discovered he was investigating irregularities in the company, that he could expose me, I decided it was time to destroy him, not just professionally but emotionally. I found out the thing he loved most in the world was that dog, so I planned everything. The plan was to keep Buster alive but imprisoned, using him as a psychological tool. Darius visited the dog frequently, talking about Roger, telling the animal that he had been abandoned, that he was no longer loved. A sadistic cruelty that fortunately didn't work, because dogs don't understand human lies. They only feel love and wait for those who truly love them. The part about the documents was almost comical. Darius really kept the incriminating papers on the farm, thinking they would be safe there. But Buster, curious as ever, had followed him to the hiding place once. And when Darius left the folder momentarily unattended to answer a call, the dog did what golden retrievers are famous for doing: picked up the object in his mouth and ran off as if it were a game. When he finally retrieved the folder from the animal's jaws, Darius lost control and assaulted Buster, who days later, taking advantage of a lapse by the guards, managed to get the folder again and this time hid it where no one would think to look, buried under his own kennel. "That dog ruined everything," Darius lamented in his testimony, without realizing the irony. The dog he had kidnapped to cause suffering had ended up being responsible for his own downfall. When Roger learned all these details, he felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at what Darius had done, sadness for the friendship they once had that was lost in resentment. But most of all, gratitude. Gratitude because despite all the malice, all the plans, all the cruelty, Buster had survived and returned home. And in the process, he had revealed truths that needed to come to light. "You know what's strangest?" he commented to Luna one night, the two sitting on the balcony watching the city. "If Darius had never taken Buster, if the accident had really been an accident, I would never have found you. We would never have recovered these documents. Bad people would continue doing bad things without consequences. In a way, all this pain led to something greater. My mum used to say that sometimes the universe breaks things so we can build something better with the pieces," Luna replied, wise beyond her years as always. Your mum was very smart. She was, Luna agreed, her smile sad but serene. I think she would be happy to see me now. With you, with Michael coming to live here too, with Buster. I think she'd like all this. Roger put his arm around the girl. I'm sure she's proud of you, of who you are, of the incredible person you're becoming. 3 months after that day in Trafalgar Square when it all began, Roger Allister's life was completely different. The penthouse in Primrose Hill, once a temple of solitude, now overflowed with life. Luna and Michael officially lived with him, permanent guardianship granted by a judge who had been moved by the whole story. Felicity was an almost daily presence, helping with the children and reconnecting with the brother she had almost lost to depression. The construction company not only survived the scandal, but prospered. Roger's transparent stance during the crisis had become a valuable asset. Clients trusted him precisely because he had proven to be honest, even when it would have been easier to hide inconvenient truths. New contracts emerged, some specifically because companies wanted to be associated with someone who had demonstrated character. And Buster, the golden retriever who involuntarily triggered an anti-corruption operation, lived his days as every dog deserves, loved, safe, surrounded by affection. He had become a small local celebrity, with the story of his rescue having gone viral nationally. People stopped Roger on the street to ask about the hero dog. He always gently corrected them. Buster was not a hero. He was just a faithful dog who had been a victim of terrible circumstances, but had survived because the love between him and his owner was stronger than any cruelty. Luna's dreams continued, but their nature changed. They were no longer about Buster trapped or suffering. Now she dreamed of beautiful things, parks full of flowers, children playing, a family gathered around a bountiful table. As if the universe, having used her gifts to correct an injustice, now allowed her to simply be a child. One Sunday morning, Roger woke to the sun streaming through the window and sounds coming from the kitchen. He found Luna making pancakes with Michael's enthusiastic but clumsy help. Buster was lying in the middle of the kitchen, always vigilant in case something tasty fell to the floor. The scene was so perfectly common, so beautifully normal, that Roger had to stop at the door and simply absorb the moment. "Good morning, Uncle," Luna greeted him cheerfully. "We're making surprise breakfast." "And we already burned 2 pancakes," Michael added with brutal honesty, making everyone laugh. Roger entered the kitchen, ruffled Michael's hair, kissed the top of Luna's head, and knelt to hug Buster, who received the affection with that characteristic supersonic tail wag. "You know what I was thinking?" he said, as he helped flip a pancake that threatened to burn. "That this is the kind of Sunday I always wanted to have. Noise, past people I love around me. It took me a long time to understand this, but now I do. Home isn't made of walls, it's made of people." "And dogs," Michael added. "Especially dogs," Roger agreed, laughing. After breakfast, they all went to Hyde Park. Buster ran across the grass as he hadn't in months. Luna and Michael played on the playground, and Roger sat on a bench watching everything with a heart so full it seemed incapable of containing so much happiness. Nolan appeared for a casual visit, bringing ice cream for everyone. Felicity arrived soon after with a new ball for Buster and board games for the children. And there, under the London sun, surrounded by the green of the park and the blue of the lake, they formed something none of them had expected to find, but all needed: a family. It wasn't the traditional family from television commercials or perfect portraits. It was a family patched with pieces of pain, sewn with threads of hope, held together by genuine love. A businessman who learned that success without meaning is just emptiness. A girl of prophetic dreams who could finally dream of the future. A boy who had regained his sister and gained a home. A sister who had reconnected with the brother she had almost lost. A former police officer who discovered it's never too late to be part of something bigger. And a golden retriever who, unknowingly, changed everyone's destiny just by being faithful to the love he always felt. Weeks turned into months. The case against Darius and the other corrupt individuals progressed, slow but inexorable, through the English justice system. Roger was called a few more times to testify, but each session was quicker, more routine. The media novelty had cooled. replaced by other scandals, other dramas, and he was grateful for that, for the return to privacy, for the chance to live without the spotlight. Luna began attending an excellent private school, where she quickly excelled not only academically, but socially. Teachers commented on her maturity, her empathy, her unique ability to understand people. Michael would follow her to the same school the following year. Both attended weekly therapy, processing past losses and traumas, building solid foundations for the future. And Luna's dreams, those that had been the key to everything, continued to be mapped and studied. Roger had connected her with researchers at Oxford University interested in cases of extrasensory perception. They did everything ethically, respectfully, never turning the girl into a guinea pig, but trying to scientifically understand the gift she carried. Luna participated because she wanted to help science understand phenomena that were still a mystery. But she never let that define her. She was, first and foremost, just Luna, a 10-year-old girl who liked to draw, loved chocolate ice cream, supported the local football team because Roger did, and dreamed of becoming a vet when she grew up. Exactly 1 year after that meeting in Trafalgar Square, when it all began, Roger organized a small celebration. Just family, him, Luna, Michael, Felicity, Nolan, and some of the men who participated in the rescue, Frederick Caldwell and his wife, and Buster, naturally, who was the guest of honor. "I want to make a toast," Roger announced when everyone was gathered on the balcony, glasses of juice and wine raised. "A year ago, I was a lost man. I had given up on everything that mattered. I thought the pain of what I lost was greater than any possibility of future happiness. But then a girl with an old umbrella appeared and changed everything. Luna, you taught me that sometimes the impossible happens, that dreams can be more than just dreams, that a 10-year-old child can have more wisdom than a 50-year-old businessman. You gave me Buster back, but more than that, you gave me back my will to live. So this toast is for you, little one, for your courage, your kindness, and for the incredible gift you have. May you continue to use it always for good, and may you always be blessed as you have blessed us." Luna, embarrassed by so much attention, blushed to the roots of her curly hair, but her eyes sparkled with happiness. "Uncle Roger, I just did what I had to do. The dreams showed me the way and I followed, but you're the one who had the courage to believe in a crazy street girl who talked about impossible dreams. You're the one who risked everything to save Buster. You're the one who opened your home and your heart to me and Michael, so actually, I'm the one who has to thank you." There wasn't a dry eye on the balcony. Even Nolan, a tough man trained not to show emotion, discreetly wiped his eyes. The toast was made. And at that moment, with the sun setting over London painting the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink, with family reunited and Buster lying at Roger's feet in absolute peace, everything seemed to have finally found its place. The story that began with loss ended with gain. The journey that started in despair culminated in hope, and the lives that fate had intertwined that afternoon in Trafalgar Square were forever connected by bonds stronger than blood, bonds of choice, of love, of shared purpose. Darius Blackwood would serve his sentence, eventually get out, rebuild his life away from the spotlight. The resentment he had carried for so long would finally dissolve during the years of forced reflection behind bars. There would be no immediate forgiveness, no dramatic reconciliation. Some wounds are too deep to heal completely, but there would be peace, the kind that comes when one finally accepts responsibility for one's own mistakes. The diverted funds, recovered through settlements and auctions of frozen assets, were directed towards renovating public schools and building new health clinics in London and the metropolitan area. Ironically, the stolen money that should have benefited the population years earlier would finally fulfill its original purpose. Roger personally oversaw some of these projects, ensuring they were executed with absolute integrity. It was his way of honoring the second chance life had given him. Luna would grow up surrounded by love, education, and opportunities. Her gifts would be studied, respected, but never exploited. She would become, in time, a bridge between worlds, the scientific that seeks rational explanations and the mystical that accepts mysteries as part of the human experience. But before all that, she would simply live her childhood and adolescence as every child deserves. Protected, loved, free to dream not only when she slept, but also when awake. Michael would flourish alongside his sister, overcoming initial shyness to reveal a vibrant personality and a natural talent for music. Roger would buy a piano for the apartment, hire teachers, encourage the boy's gift. And on quiet nights when Michael played soft melodies on the piano and Luna drew while Buster slept at their feet, Roger would sit in his favorite armchair and simply thank the universe for having transformed tragedy into a miracle. And Buster, the involuntary catalyst for everything, would live his golden years as every dog should, loved unconditionally, never again alone, surrounded by affection and comfort. The scar above his eye would remain as a physical reminder of what he had survived, but also as a symbol of resilience. When his days on Earth eventually ended, many years in the future, it would be in peace, surrounded by everyone he loved after a full and happy life. And Roger, devastated but grateful, would know that this time he had done everything right, loved completely, not wasted a single moment. But all of that was still in the future, in the present on that balcony under the English Midlands sky that gradually darkened. There were just people who had become family, sharing a perfect moment. Laughter echoed, stories were told, plans were made. Luna spoke animatedly about the school science fair. Michael showed a drawing he had made of Buster. Felicity talked about the trip she was planning for the next summer and invited everyone. Nolan played with the dog, throwing the ball that Buster tirelessly brought back. And Roger Alistair, the businessman who almost lost himself in darkness but was rescued by a girl of impossible dreams, watched it all and finally understood what truly mattered in life. It wasn't the buildings he had built, the contracts he had signed, the money he had accumulated. It was this: moments like that, people like those, love like that. Life, he realized, always offers second chances to those who have the courage to believe. Sometimes these chances come wrapped in tragedy. Sometimes they arrive through a child with a worn umbrella. Sometimes they require prophetic dreams and daring rescues to come to fruition. But always, always they are worth every tear, every fear, every moment of courage needed to embrace them. The sun finally set. Over London, the city lights began to turn on, thousands of them, each representing a life, a story, a dream. And in that penthouse high in Primrose Hill, one of those stories reached its happy ending. Not the fairy tale ending where everything is perfect, but the real ending where imperfections are accepted, wounds heal, and love triumphs because we choose for it to triumph. Luna yawned, resting her head on Roger's shoulder. Michael was already dozing on the sofa, overcome by the exhaustion of a full day. Buster snored softly at everyone's feet, and Roger, looking at that scene, at that improbable but perfect family, whispered to himself the words he once said to his dog, and that now applied to everyone there. "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. And I love you. I love all of you." And under the stars that began to appear in the English Midlands sky, silent witnesses to human stories since the beginning of time, that chosen family celebrated the present while building, one day at a time, a future full of promises. The end, but also, in all the ways that matter, just the beginning.